Yeah, give me 1 second. Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
Oh, great.
Thank
I
you,
heard your
guys.
voice now.
Yes, we can now hear your voice, Robin, very clearly. Okay, nice. Okay. So, hi everyone. My name is Soyan, and I'm a recent PhD graduate from McGill University. So, before diving in to tell you the stories of 20 women of color students who I interviewed for my doctoral dissertation, I do want to take some time to briefly talk about my research interests. So, as you can see from Xiaoshan's website description, my research focuses on understanding student motivation and identity development in STEM fields. I have other works that really solely focus on student motivational trajectories and introductory STEM courses, but the work today I'm presenting is more focused on identity development. So this was my passion that really drawn to me to do a PhD, and it took me a while to both conceptualize and operationalize what identity is and how to understand it. So I hope you can enjoy the stories that I'm trying to tell. So it's about 20 women of color who are in undergraduate computer science degree programs. So what I really wanted to do was explore their identity using an intersectional approach. So give you a little bit of context why I started doing this work. There is currently a lack of representation of women and women of color in computer science fields. So women earn less than 20% of computer science undergraduate degrees, with notably few women of color working in computer science fields. So to understand the stories behind the statistics, this study investigated both the personal and interpersonal experiences of women of color in computer science degree programs to identify the resources and barriers to their participation. So when you ask people why women of color are not represented in computer science fields, some may believe it is due to their lack of interest or low ability. Maybe you have heard some of people saying that, oh, women are not really interested in computer science or math, but a lot of study actually said that's not true. Female women students are also very interested in. However, many studies show no difference in so there is no difference in interest or capability between women of color and their peers. What is really important to notice is that study actually shows structural barriers such as stereotypes and discrimination to be the main biggest factor. So these barriers not only hinder women of color from participating in computer science, but also prevent minoritized students from developing their identification as a person doing computer science. So it is really important to think about doing something because in order to be in a field, you need a participation. And this participation allows you to be in the community of practices. So this is why I became really interested in the topic of identity development in computer science and wanted to see if identity theories could be used to understand the experiences of women of color. So I do want to open to the public to ask you a question. So feel free to unmute yourself or you can chat, use the chat function. So what do you think is identity? What is identity to you? Does anyone wants to share what their thoughts are about what identity is?
I imagine for me, identity is how I define myself. Who do I think I am?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I think that a lot of times when we think about identity is more about who am I, right? How Robin described is more coming from yourself, right? It is more viewed as an internal construct. Anyone has any ideas?
I think also I agree with Robin. I also think that identity is, although based on what other people think you are, you still might have a different understanding about yourself. So it's more about the perception of yourself from your it could be different from others, but it's still like it should be your own perception.
Yes, it is about our own perception, but I think it's really important to think about this relational construct about identity, right? It's not that we were born and then we are like, this is me, right? That's now how we develop this own perception. This is more about that I interact with you, I do a lot of different experiences, and I build this own understanding it. So it's not only about just focusing on the internal part of your perception, has to be understood within the relations that we're living in this environment. So there are many different views how people conceptualize identity, and this is where I face the most challenges. So this is really important in terms of how you view identity will shape how you try to assess it. So maybe Xiao Shan and Robin, if you do a similar study on identity, maybe you guys will really focus on their understanding of who themselves. So for me, because I was really interested in understanding their computer science identity, as you can see from the title. So I would really focus on what it means by being a person doing computer science. So what I used was using Carlin and Johnson's science identity model. So the construct of science identity has been really beneficial in understanding individuals' engagement in science fields. So Carlin and then Johnson proposed that science identity included three dimensions, and most of you might be familiar with confidence and performance. Confidence refers to a subjective understanding about one's knowledge and ability. Performance instead refers to the objective indicators of abilities and efforts, such as grades. And recognition is if one sees themselves and believe that others see them as a person doing science. Because it is a relational construct, I view identity as a relational construct. It is so important that it's not only about my understanding, but also how other people view about me. And finally, the concept of interest, passion for the discipline was later added when the theory was applied specifically to computer science students. So, according to this theory, personal experiences and social interactions with others shape how people view themselves and how they are recognized by others as a science person. So, recognition is a very big part of this theory. And by focusing on the four dimensions that I mentioned early and how they were impacted by experiences and interactions with others, I wanted to better understand how women of color students develop their computer science identity. However, because this research focused specifically on women of color, it was really important to also consider how their other identities related to gender, race, and ethnicity impacted their experiences as marginalized students. There are so many societal factors and systems that really impact. But for the scope of my study, I really focused on gender and race and ethnicity. So intersectional approach was really used to capture the nuances of computer science identity development for these students for whom oppressive societal system significantly impacted their opportunities and experiences. So this approach acknowledged that social system oppress specific groups based on their identity, and then minoritized people have multiple complex identity that can result in various type of challenges. So just to briefly go over the research gap, I wanted to address three research gaps particularly. So firstly, there has not been much discussion about computer science identity, or some scholars call it as computing identity, and there is a lack of consensus among researchers on how it should ideally be conceptualized. This is because most of the time, the field of computer science was mostly developed in the late 1950s and 1960s. So there just has not been much discussion about computer science identity, while there has been more consensus and more large discussion on science identity or physics identity or engineering identity. And second, very little work has explored the experiences of women of color in computer science degree programs. And third, even fewer studies have used an intersectional approach to address the experiences of minoritized students in STEM more generally. So there are a few research questions, and just to address these present gaps, So my doctoral study investigated women of color students' experiences in computer science to see if the proposed identity dimensions that I mentioned earlier were useful and if an intersectional approach could provide further information on their experiences of marginalization. So the first research question was really just focusing on what identity is and what impacts it. And the second asked how the students perceive this development in relation to their experiences. And the third asked about their experiences specifically as women of color. So the participants, so 20 students who self-identify as women of color participated in this study. So I could have actually gave them what women of color meant. I just wanted to open it up broad to the participants. And considering that some students were admitted in fall 2020, many participants had received only online instruction for the duration of their studies. And the ethnic and racial makeup of the sample was consistent with that of the department, with most participants self-identifying as East or Southeast Asian. So this is a little bit of a sample context. So this is a research-intensive Canadian university. As you might know, where I collected the data from. And the computer science undergraduate program is really renowned to be theoretical and academic focused. So there is no co-ops offered, and this is something that participant really mentioned that this has come of the downside of this program because a lot of people actually wants to go to industrial, but the school is more theoretical and academic in nature. So some students felt that this was a little bit of difficulty. And if you have taken any of the introductory courses at this university, especially computer science courses are typically large, with more than 400 students. And then the interest in these courses have rapidly increased over the years. So the computer science program provided the demographic information, and this is based on the academic year of 2021 to 2022. So you can see that there are 33% of female, and this is the racial and ethnic composition. So one of the things that you have to know about this computer science program is they already have a fairly good representation of women in this program. They are the #1 in Canada. So there are certain things that they have been really doing good to support women and women of color students' persistence in this program. Okay, and just to talk about the methodology, so in order to study identity, it's not that I can rely on quantitative measures. I wish I could have done that, but it's so important to know about their experiences and interactions. So I mentioned that I had a hard time really operationalizing identity. And one of the methods that I really took was just to listen to their stories and understand their life experiences. And I found one of the things that would be easier to do is to ask participants to draw a timeline before completing an in-depth interview where they indicate major life events and key computer science experiences. I'm going to show you what it really means by timeline drawing because you might not really know what is a timeline, and I will show that after. So after collecting their timeline drawings, I did an in-depth interview, included questions about their timeline, the 4 aspects of computer science identity, and their experiences related to their racial, ethnic, and gender identities. And because this was my first qualitative investigation, I found it very important to do a member reflection because I believe that will enhance the trustworthiness of my findings. So I later completed a member reflection phase where we reviewed the themes I had generated and refined them together. Some scholars call it as member checking, but checking in nature is very confirmatory, and I just wanted students to actually reflect what they have said, what I found. So I use the word reflection and I really try not to make it more like confirmatory. Like, for example, like, Xiao, do you think about this? Do you agree? This is confirmatory, right, in nature, because I'm requesting them yes or no answer or something other than that. I really try to open up so that students can just reflect. And I think this is a very important part when you're trying to do qualitative. So this is the timeline drawing. So Ali is just a study name that the participant have chosen. So this is the timeline drawings that they sent me before the interview. So there are some participants who provide so many information that I have to go over really carefully. And there are things that I did ask, like I was really interested in this post-it note because it's about how her interest in computer science changed over the years. And this was something I asked her during the interview as well. And she really talked about this networking conference that she found helpful. So I found information that I could ask for the in-depth interview. And then I kind of like really summarized, okay, these are the major experiences that she had. These are some interactions that she had in terms of computer science. And this is another example of Wendy. So she loves using Microsoft Word growing up, and she even used it to create her timeline drawing. So one interesting aspect of her timeline is in here, how she coded certain sections involving her computer science experiences. So she said about when she was scared, about wanting to try, and then she's like anxiously wanting to belong in computer science or being relatively comfortable in this field. So in these sections, I circle here are certain parts of the timeline that I was really interested to know more about during the interview, such as why here interest pick in this specific course. So you can see that in the first circle, there are people like friends started taking computer science classes. She didn't want it to take it because she was a very smart kid and she felt that, oh, if she doesn't do well in computer science, she felt that her reputation could be tarnished. So there are many different things that students mention, and this is something that I go in depth in the interview to ask more about it. So this is the beneficial part of the timeline because you allow participants to share their stories in a way that makes more sense to them. Because a lot of times we think that we live forward, but the stories that we tell is backward. So it's so important that you use certain methodologies to capture that. And also other timeline, this is airy. So you can see that there's so many different versions of how people draw timeline drawing. And I didn't give them too much of an instructions because I just wanted them to just do whatever they want. I just tell them, okay, use a paper and a pen and just to describe whatever you want. And as you can see that she also identified key moments as well as aspects that were either discouraging or encouraging in her computer science journey. So you can see here that she wrote this encouragement. So one thing I noticed from her timeline was how her father had told her to pursue either medicine or biology and discouraged her from choosing engineering, that which he believed was detrimental for women. So during the interview, Ari again told me how discouraging this experience was, thus clearly illustrating how social interactions could discourage women of color from pursuing a field of study. So I then analyzed these timelines. So there are so many information. And later in the interview, I asked participants to elaborate in the interview, such as when they started to develop interest or participate in computer science activities like hackathons. So both timeline and interview data were then assessed using reflective thematic analysis based on Brown and Clark's 6 phases that included getting familiar with the data, coding, generating initial themes, developing and reviewing themes, refining and naming themes, and writing up themes. So as you might know, qualitative is so iterative process. I don't know how many times I went back and had to like change the code or the themes and then review it. So themes were repetitively refined for clarity, such as through member reflection. So member reflection was a very helpful phase for me because I was able to ask the participants and then review and reflect them together. So I do want to start with the deductive results because as you might know, there were 4 dimensions that I were interested. So deductive, or some people call it as top-down approach, was used to see if the 4 dimensions of identity were evident in participant responses. So overall, each of the four aspects were observed. And because the responses for performance and confidence overlap significantly, there were three final deductive dimensions. So just to start with interest, so initial findings were pretty similar with other computer science studies in showing students' interest or passion for computer science topic to be an essential aspect of their identity in the field. So students actually typically stated that they did not have much formal computer science educational experiences before coming to university, and instead reported that it was in their introductory courses at university they first learned what computer science was and that they really enjoyed it. I think it might be pretty similar from the people that we never took computer science courses growing up. I don't think that was actually offered it really formally and was very similar to other women of color participants that I interviewed. So a lot of them really developed their interest in this introductory computer science courses. And they were like, oh my God, this is so fun. I'm able to create this. So this is when their interest really largely developed. And interest was actually not that salient in a lot of like physics identity or engineering identity, because if we think about it, physics is something that we learn throughout in our school programs, like more formal school programs. And the subjects that we learn, we have more chances to learn in formal education, like primary and secondary. Interest was not a salient factor because you already are familiar with it. But for computer science, I think it's because that they never had a chance to formally learn about it. I think interest was still big in the population of undergraduate students. So the findings for confidence and performance were also pretty similar with other studies and showed that students view subjective confidence beliefs and objective performance indicators as overlapping concepts. So doing well equals with competencies. So doing good also meant that they're good at it, where like it's kind of weird, but having a good grades means that they're like, oh, I know about this. And I know about this means I'm good at this. So there was a lot of overlap between how students really think about this confidence, subjective beliefs about their ability, but also the objective performance. One of the things that really came out a lot for confidence and performance was about experiences and problem solvings. So working on internships or applied projects showed to themselves and others that they were capable of solving problems and performing well in computer science. And about the recognition, I think this might be the biggest part of this model. So most participants did not have much interaction with faculty members due to online instruction and large class size, right? If you think about a classroom with 400 students, it's so hard to actually interact with the faculty member. So what really happened is that women of color in this study consistently reported receiving recognition from interactions with their peers. So such as when they were able to successfully answer their peers' question in relation to computer science. However, they also shared that compliments and recognition from male peers was especially meaningful for them due to their status and privilege in this male-dominated field. So I think this is something we can really think about it. And participants were also asked, so now it's the more internal perception part, right? Ask if and why they view themselves as a computer science person. So most of my sample in my study typically reported that they view themselves as a person doing computer science because of their interest in the field or because others believed that they were good at it. So overall, what I found was that when participants' understanding of who they were aligned with what they believe a person doing computer science should be like, this positively contributed to women of color identifying themselves as a person doing computer science. So just to give yourself a little bit of example what it means by having an alignment. So she is another participant. She chose this name, which was really hard to write in my dissertation because it was she. I had to like clarify that this is a participant name. So I asked her, what does it mean to be a person doing computer science? And what she mentioned was, oh, it's not being scared to ask questions, not to be afraid to share your knowledge with others. And I asked her, so do you think yourself as a person doing computer science? And she said yes. And I asked her, can you describe what characteristics makes you feel, perceive yourself that way? And then what she said that she's not scared, first of all. And then she said that she can reach out. She's not really scared. And then ask other people and share knowledge. And I think this was really similar alignment with how she viewed what it means to be a computer science person. So this alignment really helped her to view herself as a person doing computer science. So this alignment was very important for one's perceptions. Okay, just to summarize a little bit, I have a lot of results. I just realized that I have more that is coming. So just to talk about the three dimension a little bit. So overall, the deductive findings show that both personal experiences and social interactions contributed to women of color identifying as a person doing computer science. So their prior experiences and accomplishments influence not only their self-view, but also how they are recognized by others as a computer science person. Another interesting aspect was how these experiences also shape their understanding of what a computer science person is. So participants with more practical experiences also reported less stereotypical beliefs about what computer science involved and who could participate. So because how one understand what a computer science people is was a big aspect, it is also important to think about people who might have more stereotypical beliefs about what computer science person is and how that can impact their identity. So this is something to think about, and I will share the results of it later. But there are something beyond this deductive analysis. So I also did an inductive analysis that went beyond this three or four identity dimensions and used a bottom-up approach that revealed multiple themes related to barriers experienced as women of color in computer science. So the male-dominated nature of computer science tended to make women of color feel intimidated. So although some directly experienced negative interactions with male peers, was really mainly observing the strong presence and privileged behavior of male students that contributed to women of color students experience negative emotions in computer science spaces. They also mentioned how common stereotypes of computer science people, such as whiteness and masculinity, contributed to negative feelings. So on the left, you can actually see how Han-min and Sarah portray computer science people as men, more specifically white men. And on the right, Rain described questioning her capabilities simply because she was a girl. So just to like really think about it, so participants consistently noted how certain kind of people do computer science, such as white or Asian males, or people with an intrinsic passion for the field. But what is really important here is that women of color who did not see themselves or were not seen by others as aligning with the stereotypes tended to have more difficulty identifying with computer science. So multiple participants actually reported experiencing a misalignment between their self-image and their idealized image of a computer science person. So, for example, Ashley was doing a joint major in computer science and biology. So although this option allowed her to graduate faster by requiring her to take fewer biology courses, it also contributed to her not feeling like a valid member of the computer science community because she thought computer science people were intrinsically motivated and enjoy doing computer science tasks even in their free time. So this stereotype did not match her self-image because she was studying computer science for other extrinsic reasons. And Ashley was really not the only participant drawn to computer science due to other extrinsic reasons such as usefulness. And consistent with the high demand for computing skills in the workplace, participants repetitively mentioned more extrinsic reasons for studying computer science, such as having a hireable skill. And maybe this is why we had so many people who wanted to learn computer science, because it was such an important thing that the companies were requiring. And this is really shown in my participants as well. So Meg, for example, she learned in high school. She was doing a lot of career search before she even went to university. And then she found that, oh, they were like listing computer science skills. And she was persisting in computer science, even though she clearly did not like it. I think this is something really interesting to think about, that there is something beyond interest. It's not that people who are in computer science or who do computer science are intrinsically motivated. There are the other reasons why people participated in it. And this is why it's really important to think about other dimensions that are in identity. But we talk about some barriers, but people also mention positive resources that supported their computer science identity development. So I'm going to share most of the quotes here. So similar to Mira's quote on the left, they highlighted the importance of a support system, including family, friends, significant others, and teachers. And also, similar to She's quote on the right, many found it encouraging to see others like them working as teaching assistants, instructors, or employees in computer science fields. The participants often share how seeing other women of color made them feel that it was normal to be in computer science and that they could do well. They also, one of the things that I do want to talk a little bit about is more the intersectional nature of their multiple identities. So more specifically, the specific type of challenges and resources experienced as women of color were different between individual participants based on their positionality and context. So for example, Asian students consistently told me how being a woman in computer science was more salient to them than being an Asian, because Asian students are more overrepresented in computer science fields. So these students also reported that they face different stereotypes as Asian students, such as being naturally good in math and science, and experience unique struggles, such as finding it hard to connect with other types of students due to Asian students tending to stay inside their racial bubbles. But on the other hand, for Black and Latina students, their racial identities tended to be more salient than their gender identities. So for example, Ari here emphasized the struggles of being a Black computer science student and find it even hard to consider the struggles of being a woman, considering how few Black women are in this field. So Ari's racial identity was most salient in computer science spaces. So she really felt pressure to represent all Black students well and avoided asking questions to not appear incompetent. However, the interview responses of another Black participant were very different. So interviewee was born in Africa. She did not have access to computers before coming to university and wanted to study computer science to advance her home country's technology. So she actually really did not focus on representing her race, but instead emphasized how her ethnic and nationality as a Kenyan citizen contributed to her experiences in computer science. And you can understand that how individuals' positionality can really shape their identity and experiences. So for example, Ari, we have a lot of multiple complex identities that are going on here. For Ari was really focused on representing Black people really well. And then that it posed her a lot of pressure to be in computer science. While for interview, she really just focused on her ethnic identity as a Kenyan and nationality, because what she really wanted to do was advance her home countries. So it really how their positionality and their salience of their identity really shape their experiences. And I think this is something that I found it very important, and what intersectionality could actually allow to understand this more complex, multiple nature of identities. And participants described mixed feelings about representing women of color in computer science. So there were some positives, like feeling proud about adding diversity to a field, while some people feel that they felt singled out when they did not satisfy the stereotypes or high standards. So some participants also expressed discomfort with being congratulated simply for being present in STEM. So they further describe how terms like woman in STEM actually contributed to gender stereotypes by highlighting that they were underrepresented and did not belong. So these statements really highlight the importance of thinking critically about the terms that we use to promote the participation of women of color in STEM. So just to go really briefly about the discussion points are that although various other issues were addressed in participant stories, this main deductive and inductive themes showed how various factors contributed to how women of color identify as a person doing computer science. So a key factor if this marginalized students felt recognized by others and saw themselves as a computer science people, despite stereotypes and experiences with privileged others in this field. So it's really important to think about that identity is not only an internal construct, not only about my own understanding, but it is really relational construct and how it really relies on this recognition is really important part to consider when you're trying to study identity. And also, the findings demonstrate the intersectional nature of multiple identities, so meaning that the experiences of one woman of color should not be assumed to generalize to another, even if they share the same racial background. And finally, even though we talk about some barriers, what was really important was the support networks for them to achieve their both academic and career goals. So there are some practical implications about that. We noticed there is not, in my participants, there was not a lot of discrimination or sexism or racism that they encountered. It was mostly about the stereotypes. And what really helped to address the stereotypes were having gender and racial representation in academic and career spaces. So whether it could have been in classes or through mentoring opportunities, observing similar others was highly encouraging and enabled them to envision themselves in the field. And practical experiences also contributed to women of color better identifying with computer science. So two of the participants really both reported how internship allowed them to meet computer science professionals and better understand what the work involved. So these practical experiences also help participants to adopt less stereotypical images of a computer science people. And finally, participants emphasize peer support and how having a space to connect with similar marginalized others, or in literature we call it as counter spaces, help them identify with the field. This counter spaces not only included dedicated online chats, but also student associations that provided mentorship and networking opportunities. But however, it is really worth noting that these resources often rely heavily on the efforts of student-led organizations to ensure more comprehensive and sustainable support for women of color in computer science. Greater investment of resources by educational institution is likely needed to maintain a more inclusive and diverse environment for these learners. So there are many limitations. There are always limitations in every study because the study was conducted at a research-intensive university with high-achieving students, and many of whom were from gifted primary or secondary programs. So it's really important to examine whether these findings are also applicable to women of color in less competitive computer science programs. And about the methodology, the design of interview questions might have allowed participants to overlap confidence and performance because I asked them, what does it mean by being good in computer science? I should have more really focused on their subjective and objective performance indicator, then I could have had a different results. But how I formed the interview questions might have made students to talk about confidence and performance as an overlapping constructs. And finally, so multiple participants actually mentioned how other identities such as sexual orientation, disability, or immigration status impacted their experiences. However, because of the current scope of the study, I didn't really include all these other identities that could have impacted their experiences in computer science. But I think it's really important for future studies to investigate how other oppressive social systems may intersect with gender, ethnic, and racial identities to prevent otherwise bright and motivated students from realizing their potentials in computer science. So, if you have any questions, you can always let me know. Any questions? Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much, Soyeon. I'm glad that I am here to listen and participate in your talk. I found myself actually changed some understanding on about what identity is, firstly. And also I like your quote about we live forward, but the story that we tell is always backward.